Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Lammesser and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at L&E Research. I want to thank everyone who is joining us for today's webinar, Mobile Research in 2016, an update, with our very special guest speaker, Ray Poynter. Ray is the Managing Director of the Future Place and the founder of NewMR. He has spent the last 35 years at the forefront of market research, technology, and innovation, and has authored 2 books, The Handbook of Mobile Market Research and The Handbook of Online and Social Media Research. As the preferred choice for recruiting and facilities in the market research arena, L&E is fortunate to be able to work alongside knowledgeable leaders in the industry like Ray. This allows us to enhance our services and better serve clients like you. Ray is in popular demand as a conference speaker, workshop leader, writer, and consultant. So we are thrilled and honored to have him here today to share his insight in the area of mobile market research. We're going to pass the presentation over to Ray. We will open up for questions at the end. You can submit your questions through GoToWebinar user control panel.
Moving on to mobile Qual, passive data, and I'm going to finish with some tips and some case examples of what's happening in the mobile world. So I'm sure it's not a surprise to anybody on this call, mobile is ubiquitous. It's absolutely everywhere. Looking across different suppliers, the software platforms, the panel companies, and so on, about 30% of all survey starts are now coming from mobile devices. So people are voting with their device. They're saying, I want to use mobile. Unfortunately, when you look across a wide range of survey offers from the platforms and the panel companies, only about a quarter of surveys are suitable. So that 30% is 30% of every survey, and only about a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to get a really good experience. And that's a major problem for our industry. Tablets and smartphones are becoming the device of choice for face-to-face research. So if you're stopped in the street or at a central location or at a hotel or whatever it might be, the chances are now, whether that is in New York or Nairobi in Africa, that the person interviewing you is using a mobile device. CAPI interviews predominantly becoming mobile device. Pew, the Pew Research Center is probably the world's premier research organization. The people who really try hardest to get it right. They now target 75% of their telephone interviews to be 2 mobile devices. Back in 2008, that was only 25%. That's how fast things are changing. Now, here are some of the reasons that Pew made that decision and why the whole of the research industry needs to think about it. So on the left, the chart there is from 2004 through to 2015, showing the percentage of US adults living in households which only had a mobile phone, no landline going into those houses. And you can see how that's escalated. But then think to yourself, because maybe you have got a landline in your house, how often do you answer that landline? Does every adult in the house actually answer that landline? And if that landline was a call from a market research organization, would you be as likely to take the call? So the world has changed massively. On the right-hand side, you can see how the Pew Research Center has responded to that change faster than most commercial market research organizations have responded to that change. And it's all because the consumer has chosen. They have said it's mobile. People are taking market research surveys on their mobile device, even when the survey is rubbish on their mobile device. Even when we ask them not to, there are lots and lots of side-by-side studies where people have tried to divide the sample into 4 cells, and they've said, would you please do this on your PC? Would you please do this on your mobile? And so on. And still, people do it on their mobile. Sometimes we have something we really want people to do on their PC. We put in sniffers, other bits of software, but you can't always detect that somebody is using a mobile device. So it's not down to market research. It's to tell customers that they can only take part in research studies if they do this. We need to get with the kids, I guess is one of the expressions you might use. And when we talk about mobile devices, mostly, particularly in the developed economies like the United States, it's a smartphone thing. Tablets are important, but nothing like as much as smartphone. Now, in the USA, the penetration of smartphones is about 80%. Now, that's amazing when you think about how recently these things arrived. and now everywhere. In the UK, 77%. Not only that, but most people have data contracts. It doesn't cost them incremental money to take part in a research project. That has changed the game fundamentally from where we were a few years ago. Globally, so if we take into account Asia, India, China, Africa, all of these sort of places, Latin America, a third of the world's population has a smartphone, and that is accelerating. You can now get a smartphone in Africa, in India, for $50, and the price is going down. So it is becoming the absolute central tool for market research. When we talk about mobile surveys, really, we're mostly talking about an online survey created in, say, Confirm It, or Survey Gizmo, or Survey Monkey, or Qualtrics, or one of these hundreds and hundreds of platforms out there, and it's suitable for PCs and tablets and smartphones. So most mobile research is capable of being conducted on a PC, it's capable of being conducted on a tablet, it's capable of being conducted on a smartphone. And that's what we mean by most mobile surveys. Here's a great piece of data from Research Now from 2015, from a project they ran with me last year. We did a tour called the No Nonsense Tour. We're just going to take that top line first, 24 or younger. 47% of all the surveys they took part in from that age group, they used a mobile device. So nearly half last year, so that's going to be more than half this year. And it was almost all smartphone. The 24 or younger group weren't using tablets very much, 4%. We move up a little bit to 25 to 34-year-olds, and it's 40% using mobile devices. 35 to 44-year-olds, 39. So if you're interviewing people under 45, you've really, really got to be on mobile. Otherwise, you're missing out lots and lots of really key, interesting people. If we move to the top end of the age spectrum, 55 to 64, the 65 plus, even there, a quarter of them are mobile. But we see something quite interesting. They're split 50-50 between smartphone and tablet. And one way of looking at this world from a market research perspective is that for older people it's mostly a tablet thing. Tablet is the preferred, increasingly is the preferred device of the over 55s, the over 65s, the over 75s. The number of PCs that are going to be sold in the future to people over 70 is minimal. The quality now of the tablets that are available, the sorts of things people want to use a computer for when they're not in employment, mean that the tablet is going to grow and grow and grow. So we can't completely forget tablets. We need to have this mixed picture. It's a smartphone thing for most people, it's a tablet thing for some people. Research Now also do an interesting thing in that they score the surveys they're sent, because of course as a panel company they get sent surveys from hundreds and hundreds of different, well, thousands of different organizations. And this is the picture last year. It's moved on a bit since then, I'm glad to say. Mobile optimized surveys that were really good for mobile was about just under 20%. Mobile friendly, so yeah, they looked okay, they felt okay, there were no particular problems, but they just weren't optimized, just under 30%. So that is just under half between them. Possible. They would run, but they were horrible. You had to scroll both ways. You had to scroll things off the page, click and move, and all those sort of terrible things. That was about a fifth. But nearly 40% were mobile incompatible. They used things like Adobe Flash. They used images that wouldn't fit on the screen. So lots and lots of enormously big problems. And these are surveys being sent by professional market research organizations or qualified insight managers in client organizations that was simply mobile incompatible. That has to stop. That is not acceptable because you're missing out on all sorts of key people when you do that. Last year, there was a lot of discussion about what was called device agnostic, that we should design our research so that it's suitable for PC and tablet and smartphone and so on. And the thinking has moved on. Really this year, most of the smart thinking is around mobile first. Design it for mobile, envision it for mobile, and it's really easy to make it suitable for tablet and PC if you design it for smartphone first. If you design it for PC and try to make it mobile agnostic, you tend not to get a really good experience. You make too many compromises. So the good money now, the strong recommendation is make it mobile first. What does mobile first mean? Well, it means short. And this is actually a point of conflict with a lot of insight managers and client-side people who would love to have mobile surveys. They would love to have mobile first, but they don't necessarily want to change the survey instrument. And frankly, we have to. The questions have to be shorter. And you know what? When we make the questions shorter and more intuitive, people understand them better. The answer lists need to be shorter. We frequently put in far too many answers in those lists. Let's really focus in on what people are interested in. And the whole survey length needs to be shorter. There are a variety of ways that people are tackling that particular challenge. You need to use question types that work well on smartphones. So select works better than rank. Show people 12 things and ask them to rank them. It's not a great question on a PC. It's a terrible question on a mobile. If you've got 12 things, ask people to pick their top 3. That's a really quick and easy exercise. It will give you data that is probably cleaner, easier to work with, and it fits better. 3-point scales would be my recommendation, but certainly 3 or 5-point scales, not 7 and 10-point scales. It works better, it's easier for people to answer, it moves along faster. Limit the number of open ends. Don't exclude open ends. People will fill in open ends on mobile surveys, but not too many. And don't force them, because maybe they are moving, they're walking down the street and they're clicking your thing. Maybe they're a passenger in a car, in the back of a taxi. They can read the survey, they can click, but typing might be tricky for them under those circumstances. So I'm not a fan of forcing open-ended responses anyway, but particularly in mobile. This is really important. If you're involved in a project, whether you're the sponsor of the project, whether you are the analyst, whether you're the senior manager, you should experience that survey on your personal smartphone. There should be a formal testing process. You doing that is not part of the formal testing process. But if you look at it and you say, you know what, I wouldn't do this survey, then don't field it that way. It needs changing. Make sure that your client experiences the survey on their smartphone. Don't let them get away just testing it on the PC. Get them onto the smartphone. Most of the good software platforms now, Blaze, Pulse, Geo-the, all these sort of things, Confirm It and so on, they have a button and it says Enable Mobile. And you click that. That does not make it a mobile suitable survey. It will remove things that do not run, but it will not make the design right, because mobile is about design more than technology. The technology is the easy bit. The more difficult bit is making sure that it looks right on the mobile, that the questions are intuitive, that they're sensible, that the whole length is right. You don't get that by just pressing mobile enable or auto mobile button within the tool. So all of that relates to surveys that might be done on a PC. They're online surveys. An email has gone through to your smartphone. You've clicked on the link and it's run. It'll be running through the browser, be that Safari, Chrome, Internet Explorer, whatever the browser is on your smartphone, just like it would on a PC. The other option is you might be using an app. So an app is a piece of software, it's downloaded on your mobile, so it might be Candy Crush, it might be the Maps app, it might be Kindle, you might be reading books, it could be a calculator, thousands and thousands of apps. Most of us, I mean, I had a skiing holiday last week with a really dangerous app because it told you how fast you skied down the last hill, so me and my children kept trying to look and see who could get the best high score, as we call this, as opposed to simply a piece of passive data collection. That was an app on the phone. There are research apps. There are qualitative, quantitative research apps, a wide variety of them. There are apps for collecting passive data. Ideally, if you're using an app, then your participants, your respondents, will download it from the App Store. don't have something that looks really dodgy that they download from your website. That's just going to make people more nervous. There's some positives and there's some negatives about apps. The positive, it doesn't necessarily need the internet to be available. So if you're trying to follow people through the day and they're taking underground trains and there aren't any internet, or they go out of the range of internet, they're in buildings where internet is less available, then the app doesn't always have to have, if it's programmed right, it doesn't always have to have the internet available. It can send the information later. That's less and less relevant because actually lots of places do have internet all the time. Lots of phones are now picking it up from 4G. So that's still an advantage, but less so. Apps can access more features of the phone. There is a difference between the iPhone and the Android. It's much easier to access features on the Android, and the iPhone is more limited. But apps can always access more information than something that is an online survey can access. They can do more in terms of locations and sensors and the cameras and the videos. Just because they can doesn't mean they should or they're legal. Nearly every software company I've spoken to who writes apps for mobile phones have been asked, could you turn the camera on without asking permission? And they say, well, yes, but we won't. In most countries and most places it's not legal. Nowhere is it ethical. But that kind of gives you an indication about how much more connection there is between the app and the phone. And we can use push notification. Push notification is really useful. So we can tell people, okay, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, please tell me what you're doing. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, please tell me what you're doing. Or, okay, you have just walked into the Myers store, you've just walked into JCPenney, tell me, please do this survey. You've just walked into Starbucks. Let's follow this information. So we can push a survey to somebody based on where they are, based on time of day. You've just finished a phone call, pop up a survey. It requires permission, of course, and it sometimes requires them to download an app. But you can do a lot of things with push notification that you can't do with a regular survey invite. So what are the negatives? Well, the first one is that they've got to download it. Now, there used to be a lot of technical issues about people downloading apps onto their phones. They've got fewer and fewer. Most people have got a lot of apps on their phones. If you send them a link to the App Store, a lot of people are capable of doing it. But there's a lot of reluctance. People need to know, why should I download that onto my phone? What will it do to my phone? What will it do to my battery? What will it do to my costs? Sorry. The apps have got to be written for each platform. So obviously there is a bit of extra cost and a bit of extra time. If you're writing an app just for one study, it's not very cost efficient. So reusable apps are becoming very much the way that people are doing business. And it excludes people with PCs and those who don't do the app. So if we want a really broad-based study, then saying to people, well, you've got to have a smartphone and you've got to be willing to download the app before we will collect any information from you, may actually be a problem in terms of coverage and representativity. So we need to bear that in mind too. So we've got a bit of a balance between mobile browser-based surveys and apps, mobile browser-based activities, sorry, not surveys, and apps. Mobile is easier, but it's slightly more limited. The vast majority of mobile research is done through the browser. It's probably something like 90% of all mobile research at the moment in the market research world relates to the browser. Apps, more powerful, but they're harder to implement. Most geo work, which we're going to talk about soon, most in-the-moment work, so you're in the superstore, I want you to do a survey now, you've just finished your meal, I want you to do a survey now, you're on the train, I want you to do a survey now. Most of that is app, most push research is app. More data is collected via apps than it is via mobile browsers, but that data is not normally collected by market research companies. It's collected by companies like Flurry, who embed apps inside other people's services. So you might download a game. Flurry will record where you are when you play the game, how long you played the game, what else was running on your phone, and so on, and send it back to the game manufacturer and to Flurry, who will then market it. So there is probably more data collected via apps, but there's more market research conducted by mobile browser at the moment. And this will go backwards and forwards over the next few years. It's not clear which one will win out. Really, the important thing for you is not to take a big bet on one or the other. Simply choose what's available. Mobile surveys, let's have a think about how they scored as a rate card. They're slightly slower to create because you can't simply keep reusing those surveys that you've already got set up for the PC. You've got to do a bit of redesign work. You've got to shorten the text. You've got to test them on both iPhone and Android. So there's a little bit more time, slightly more expense, but it's getting less and less all the time. There is the pressure to use shorter surveys, and some people see this as a negative, some see it as a positive. There is less research on research about what works on mobile, but that problem is largely disappearing because every year we have more information. The sample frame is often different. If you do a study and you compare the PC data with the mobile data, it is different. It is not different because the questions cause different answers. It's different because different people do the survey. The people who do the mobile survey will tend to be younger. They will tend to be slightly more affluent. They will tend to be more African American. They will tend to be more Hispanic. They will tend to be at home less. They will tend to be more energetic. All of those are demographic type differences caused by who prefers to take a PC survey and who prefers to take a mobile survey. So you will get the shifting answers when you shift to start using mobile. Some questions can give different results. Not many. Things like the multi-select grid tend to give you more answers on the mobile phone, and that is a problem. But what about the positives? The responses come in faster. You get far more responses within the first 10 minutes, first 1 hour, 2 hours than you get with doing email surveys to PCs. So this is the flip side of the sample. Yes, you're getting different people, but that's great. Before, you were missing out on the right number of African Americans, Hispanics, young professionals, active outdoor people. We're now reaching those people, so that's a real positive. Most questions give different answers, and this overwhelming, more than 90% of question types when asked on both devices give you the same sorts of answers. The information can be more accurate. I'm going to show you an example later about cereal boxes, but people can actually check their information. If they're just answering on the smartphone, they can look up, they can check something in a way that's much harder to do, or they can send you a picture of something instead of sending you some text. The data can include more things. It can include location, it can include video, it can include pictures. All of that's a great addition. There is a slightly curious thing, which is that most mobile surveys are actually completed in the home or in the office. So it's not necessarily breaking us into new territory, but we expect that to change as people become more and more comfortable with mobile surveys. So that's the quantitative world. What about the qualitative world? Here's a grid from the book that Naveen Williams and Sue York wrote on mobile research when we looked at the qualitative. So the top left square there, that is looking at the conventional world. So people are using mobile devices such as tablets for stimuli in the face-to-face groups and in-depth interviews. They're asking people to use them for sorts, watch a video, all sorts of things. Homework, so asking people to collect photos to share in the group. Take a photo of what your kitchen's like. Please show me your cupboards. Okay, show me your wardrobe, and we bring those along to the group and we share those out. Communicating with participants, how to find the focus group facility. All sorts of details like that, timing, messages. So we've simply embedded that aspect of mobile devices into our world. The second one, if we go down to the bottom left, connecting with mobile. If you do online focus groups or online discussions and forums, online depth interviews, if you run insight communities, people need to be able to connect from their tablet. They need to be able to connect from their smartphone. It's not enough to run those things from PCs. So you now get some quite strange situations where people are logging into online focus groups from public transport, from public CAFs, while they're sitting there on their device. and it's just a change in how we do things. So the left-hand side is really just about fitting that mobile world into a world that already existed. The right-hand side is more exciting. So participant research. Diaries, people used to write diaries, and they did a really bad job of it by and large. Much better to get them to use their smartphone to collect a mobile diary, taking photographs of things, using push notification to remind them they haven't put something in yet, being able to tell what is already in the diary to prompt people. Ethnography, where we're asking people to actively take photographs, collect videos, add comments about phenomena they see, asking them to build collages from various information, perhaps running a mobile blog. One of the earliest projects I saw was looking at how people take out a house purchase loan, a mortgage, and that process takes months. So getting them to keep a little bit of a blog, every time they have a meeting or a discussion or something like that, they just add a bit more information, photograph of the sort of leaflets they were looking at, building up this picture which enabled the researchers to follow them through the process over time. And the newest one, and this is almost all in the sort of tentative and exploratory stages, on-the-shoulder research, using things like the quantified self, the Fitbits, the Runkeepers, and all of these sorts of devices, passive tracking of their device. Google Glass, until it went bang, was being looked at and used in the same sort of way. Augmented reality. So we're going to look at a couple of cases later on, but all sorts of things you can do if you sit on the person's shoulder and use their device. Some people are getting them to hang a Memto camera, which takes a picture every 60 seconds of what's going on around them, and then building this picture up and using that as part of the qualitative process. So that's quantitative data and surveys, qualitative information. The third element of all of this, and the one that is relatively new for most market researchers, there was some passive data before, but there's a real explosion of it with mobile, is data that doesn't require the respondent to enter something. They have to agree to it, but their location data can be collected automatically. Their phone usage data can be collected automatically. Their internet usage, movement, temperature, and light. Now, some of these examples come best from outside the market research. There are weather forecasting stations now which collect information from lots and lots of people's mobile phones to find out what the temperature is around. There are others which collect information about the light quality from those mobile phones that people have signed up to be part of the process. We can measure and record the interactions between people's phones and services. So how many different Wi-Fi networks did you walk past? How many different broadcast services did you walk past? People like Nielsen are beginning to put passive data collection in to identify what advertising did you hear, or at least did you have the opportunity to hear because your mobile phone heard it, even if you didn't. And again, we can relate that with passive information. It's really important we get the right permission. There are going to be some big scandals in this area because some of the permission that the companies working in this field, not market research companies, but some of the tech companies working in this field, is likely to cause a problem, particularly in Europe. It may cause a problem in the US, but it's much more likely to cause a problem in Europe, where a lot of the rules are much stricter. So here's just a quick insight into some of that passive data. This was a half marathon I ran a couple of years ago. I had Runkeeper turned on. I've got my phone in my pocket. It tracks my distance. It tracks what I went past. It could have recorded every billboard I went past. It records every shop that I go past. What sort of speed, the incline in calories. If I got other devices on, it would have recorded my blood pressure, my heart rate, and so on. So all of that is what we mean by passive data, and we can collect all of that from the telephone. One of the big conversations is about geo, so GPS, beacons, and more. And one of the earliest things we thought we would use mobile phones for was geo-tracking. GPS comes from the satellites in the air, it's anonymous, it's free. So we thought we could just track people if they had the apps on their phones and we could find their routes. And it's really interesting but mostly it's not useful to marketers yet. If I have the information for 10 people for a week, it can be fascinating to look at the routes they took to go and buy shops. When they went past shop A to reach shop B? Where did they park to get to that shop? And it's really good if you can sit down with those people and talk to them about the decisions they made. However, if you have data for 1,000 people from 100 different cities making 10,000 different journeys, there isn't any good software around at the moment that will really break that down and say the common patterns are. So when you see analysis of it, it tends to be really lumped together and said the average travel time was this, the average speed was this, the average time spent at traffic lights was this, and that is not the level of information that the marketers want, which is things like how many times did they pass a billboard and that resulted in an additional visit or an additional purchase. So we're moving slowly in that direction, but geo-tracking using GPS has proved not to be as useful as we thought it might be. Geofencing has turned out to be much more interesting. In geofencing, you put a boundary around a site. So let's say we're talking about a Starbucks. We put an invisible boundary around it. When somebody enters or leaves, their phone knows they've done that. So one way of doing that at the moment is that you have an iBeacon in the store. As you enter the store, the iBeacon knows that that phone has entered the store, the phone knows that it has entered the store, provided that the right apps are running. And once that knowing that it's entered the store, we can launch marketing, we can launch information, hey, welcome to the store today, we've got an offer on this, or we can launch market research. And so geofencing, which can be done in a variety of different ways, is quite a growth area of marketing, and it's going to be a growth area of market research too, on the coattails of marketing. There's lots and lots of different routes to location. So GPS is one. Most phones can tell where they are if they have location turned on. Beacons, the original beacons all use sound signals. Now the Apple iBeacon, which uses Bluetooth, is another way of low energy Bluetooth, is another way of doing it. Mobile phone masts. There are a lot of services around now. Your mobile phone company knows where you are, particularly if you're making long journeys, if you're flying from city to city, which part of the city you're in, and they're beginning to sell that information. So my son works for a digital marketing company. There's a conference coming up soon about educational products. They can target messages to people when they arrive at that location to say, please go and visit stand this, and all that sort of information, purely based on that location. They're getting that from the mobile phone masts. Wi-Fi. Every time your phone goes past the Wi-Fi service, it tells the Wi-Fi service it's there, even if you don't use it. It passes across the MAC address, and that's another method of identifying where people are. So there are a growing number of Wi-Fi devices that have a range of about 3 meters. Why would somebody do a Wi-Fi device with such a small range? You put it on a stand within a conference. You put it on a stand or a shelf set in a store, and you know that somebody's approaching it and you know where they go next. User initiated, so maybe people will log in to receive a service. That's another way we can trigger it. There are other types of Bluetooth, there's infrared, there's near field communication. So there are lots and lots of ways that we can identify location. This is going to be a massive expansion over the next few years. This chart here shows you an example from FlowMinder. This was at the height of Ebola in Africa. They wanted to be able to predict where Ebola might spread. So this was using telephone data that looked at all journeys of more than 20 kilometers. And what if you can see on that map is that there are lots of journeys, but they only very occasionally cross country boundaries. So they were able to look at this information. This was a Swedish company, FlowMinder, looking at the data to help the medical authorities try to predict where Ebola might go next based on the flows that people have and move. Here's an example from a city in Scotland, in Aberdeen. They put these Wi-Fi units around the city centre. So even if people didn't use them, they collected the MAC address from the phones. A MAC address is unique, but it's anonymous. Nobody can track the MAC address back to a person. And they moved that around the shopping area. For that study, they didn't gain any permission because they said it's all unique. That was open to some dispute because if you lived there, they would be tracking you back to your address every day, and your address is not exactly anonymous. But this is probably a slightly scary example for many of the people on the phone, because you would have done this. This applies to you. You go into a shopping centre, so follow the flow through on the right-hand side. If the Wi-Fi on your phone is switched on, you'll be picked up and given a unique ID number. And that unique ID number will be tracked back to every other visit you have made to the store with that phone. Because the MAC number on your phone is anonymous, but it is unique. So they will know this is your 25th visit to the store. You're then tracked as you move through the shopping centre. You stop for 5 minutes outside a clothes shop, you browse the ground floor, and you stop for 1 hour in the cafe. So they're picking up all of that sort of information about how do people go around the store. It's all anonymous at this stage, and they can backtrack that against earlier information. But they have lots and lots of signs up saying, use our free Wi-Fi. So you sign up to the free Wi-Fi, and they will store your details, your email, your gender, your age. And now, of course, all of that information about where you go, how often you visit, what you look at, whether you went to the cafe, potentially what you ordered at the cafe, if that is factored in by the cafe as well, will be known, and it will be linked to your email address, and it will be linked to a unique identifier for you. And then they can start to use that for marketing or for research and so on. So we're moving into a world where more and more of stuff is knowable in a passive sense, but where there is a potential for inappropriate use of that information or for scandals. So we've got some exciting times to come. The state of play in 2016 for Geo. I've just shown you there's so many options out there. None of them are in widespread use in market research at the moment. Most of the projects that you see are exploratory. Some of them are fantastic, but they're really not producing in-depth, interesting, ongoing, commercially viable information. There is stuff in marketing, which is, and a lot of that will come into our zone soon. The best use is location-based projects. So if you're trying to target a survey about people attending an event, or you're trying to sample people who are attending a specific location, then it's great. It's fantastic for qualitative tracking, where you sit down and you show people their routes, follow people through in the store and say, right, now why did you shop the store this way? It's great for flow analysis. So which are the ways that people go and how fast do they go? So if you're trying to look at where to put up a billboard or a sign, you might be able to tell, okay, a lot of people walk past here, but they walk past here at about 3 miles an hour. That's too fast. They walk past here in a crowd, so they won't be able to see things. What we're looking for is places where there are plenty of people walking, but they're not walking quite so fast, and they're not walking in such a big crowd. What does Geo struggle with? It struggles with large amounts of varied journey data, which is kind of what we thought we'd be using it for most, and I'm sure we will at some stage. And it struggles if we require people to opt in. A lot of people are opting in for things like you get free Wi-Fi while you're in the shopping mall, but that may itself bring some problems in the future. Beyond that, we've got into the area of wearables. Nearly all the wearables research, the smartwatches, the monitors, the glasses, and so on, are still in the exploratory stage. There's some interesting work in health and things like that. So there are interesting projects, but they're mostly exploratory. We can take some really interesting lessons from digital glass. It needs to find a reason for being able to be commercially successful, but there was no really good research over there because there were no research compatible tools to take what Google Glass could do and deliver it into a regular research. There were some fantastic qualitative pieces. There were some real ethical problems with asking people to go around a store wearing a Google Glass and taking pictures of all sorts of people. But really it was the shortage of tools to turn what it could collect into useful information that held it up, and we need to look at that going forward. So we're going to run through just a few case studies now of different things that people are doing. Really simple example from the book that we wrote, from a case study from NewMR. They did a project, and one of the questions in it was, how many boxes of cereal do you have at home? And they looked at the data, and they could tell that it was wrong. They knew from purchase data, they knew from home visits they'd done in the past, that it was being really significantly understated. So they did another little wave, and they asked people, please take a photograph of the cereals you've got at home. They got in lots and lots of photographs. They got an intern, poor old interns, to go through and count all the cereal boxes. And they got far more cereal boxes that way than they got when they asked people to recite the number, because people were just guessing how many were in their cupboard. For a photograph, they had to look. They got more accurate data. Now, what we really want is not to use an intern, but to use recognology, the recognition technology, to look and count the boxes. And that's a little way. That's a year or two away yet, but it's coming. You could certainly use that technology to say how many Cocoa Pops, how many Kellogg's are in there. That sort of thing, the technology is already there for. This is a diary project that Vision Critical ran, and that is used in the book, trying to understand drinks. And this was in the UK. So 400 consumers kept a record for one day. And they were asked about 90-second survey every time they had a drink, who, what, why, where, when, and so on. Very simple questions like these. And that enabled all sorts of analysis that you wouldn't be able to do if people were simply using memory to collect the data. So this was one look at the data which said, what did they drink and when? So coffee, a lot of people were drinking it in the morning. It declined and declined and declined. Far fewer people drinking it after 9 p.m. in the evening. This is England, so we have a real boost of tea in the morning, and we have a real boost of tea in the early afternoon. Fruit juice, it's not a lot of fruit juice drunk in the UK, and it tends to be relatively low throughout, but a bit more at breakfast. Fizzy drinks tends to come in around lunchtime, peak around 5 to 7 o'clock. Energy drinks mostly come in around lunchtime. They're done as to give you a pick-me-up at work, not because you're playing sports. Water, we get a fairly traditional pattern, and not surprisingly what we find is alcohol's fairly low till about 4 p.m. and then it goes up and up and up. And this information was able to be broken down by, were people buying it or making it? Were they, in terms of coffee and tea, was it already making a cup of tea, or were they buying a cup of tea? Which room at home were they drinking it? Were they drinking it in coffees or in the work environment? Lots and lots of data and some branded information. I've removed all the branded information because that's actually commercially really interesting. Different brands have different successes at different times of day, for a very straightforward way of collecting information during the day. Another project this time in Australia, and we got people to follow the use, about 16 people, in an ethnography project. Every time they used canned food over the Christmas New Year period, they took a photograph, they told us about it. They did a little bit of an interview beforehand where they said that actually canned food is fairly boring and it's used as a staple and as a backup. But when they actually used it, they were talking about, oh, this is the soup my husband really loves. Oh, I use this as a treat for the children. They were using words like love and treat quite differently when it was the products they were actually using because they wanted to use them. So the mobile phone, let's get right inside their lives. And the picture, so it's on the left-hand side, it's a part of the way down. I've obscured the identity of the girl because of ethical grounds. It's almost a paradigm for what's going on. We wanted to know what was in the pantry, and the little girl's dancing in front of the pantry in her Santa Claus clothing. Because, of course, during Christmas and New Year, your family are much more important than canned food. If you want to understand canned food, you need something like a mobile study, because the topic simply isn't interesting or exciting enough to the research participants. We need those devices in order to get right inside their lives. This is a great project that Heineken, a brewer, and Confirm It ran in Africa. They wanted to find out how many different places sold beer and what were the characteristics of those places. And in many of these countries, there isn't good data. There's not good census data. There's not good record data. There's not good licensing data. So multi-country, multi-culture, they used a smartphone study with an app, and the app told the interviewers which streets to visit, and the phone told the employer to confirm it that they had visited those streets. It would track them down those streets, so they know they had visited every street. They had to go down the street, and if there was somewhere selling beer, they would take a photograph of it, they would enter some data, they would go inside the beer place and see if the person would fill in the survey and collect various information. And all of the quality control, all of the implementation was totally dependent on being mobile. So hopefully that's provided some useful information. If you want to find out more, the University of Georgia has got an online course that you can take. It's supposed to be achievable in about 20 study hours. You'll get a credit for it. I'm one of the authors of that study. There is this book I'm supposed to recommend, written with my colleagues Naveen Williams and Sue York, which hopefully you will find useful too. I'm going to finish with 6 key mobile tips. Very soon, more than 50% of all the market research data that's collected will be via mobile. It's going to be the dominant methodology in our industry. Researchers tend to use apps when mobile internet is not sufficient. That means that the use of apps will grow. I don't think anybody should take a big bet on whether it's going to be apps or mobile internet in the future. Just keep taking out the best option at this moment in time. If you are going to use an app, it's much easier to persuade people to download that app if you've got a relationship with them. So if you are an end client, then your customers are more likely to download an app from you than they are from a market research company. They're more likely to download an app that does lots of things than one that just does market research. If you are a panel company or if you run an insight community, it's much easier to get people to download an app than if it's an ad hoc situation. If your project doesn't work on mobile, you probably shouldn't be doing it that way. Now, sometimes there are no choices. Some of the really sexy virtual reality stuff needs a big screen. It's only going to work on tablets and PCs. Some of the copy testing requires a big screen. But that should be the exception, a real minimum. You can't exclude mobile users in most cases. Please, please, please personally test every research task, survey, online discussion on your own smartphone. Does it work for you? And don't think you can just press the auto mobile button. Technology is not the problem with mobile research. It's a design issue. It's about thinking. Does this look right? Have I got down to the core essentials? So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to questions. Michelle.
Hi there. We're going to give Ray a couple questions. Ray, thank you. First of all, that was fantastic. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. First question, Ray, mobile first makes sense, but doesn't that mean we're being forced to dumb down our surveys? How do we ask the more complex questions and have more complex surveys without going to the expense of phone surveys or in person?
Mostly, I don't think it means dumb down, because I think that there are a lot of problems with our existing surveys and legacy where we've actually been lazy and we've got really long explanations. There are going to be some quite interesting problems. So in most cases, I think a shorter, better survey is not going down. It's a smarter research instrument. Where we need more information, what the best people are doing that across multiple surveys. So if you've got a community or if you've got a panel, then don't ask everything in one survey. Build information up across time, and that works very strongly. But there are some situations, if we're trying to do more complex maths, and there are people working on the problem. So if we take something like choice tests and conjoint analysis, we used to ask people, here are 4 options plus none of these based on 7 attributes, and we'd ask them 16 questions per person. What is now happening is there are companies like Skim who have scaled that down. They're asking 3 options. Each option has only got 3 features, and they're using mathematical techniques like hierarchical Bayes to string that information back together. So there are people who need to raise their game in the analytics world in order to produce that data, because there was a myth that you could ask people to do these long grids and you were getting high quality information. But it was never true. So we need a smarter way of getting that information. Asking people to do a 10-point scale was not giving us more information than a 3 or a 5-point scale, but it felt like it was. So we need to meet that with smarter, shorter surveys, not dumber, shorter surveys.
Next question, what apps would you recommend?
In terms of, yeah, I'm going to dodge that. It depends if you're talking about surveys, and it depends if you're talking about qualitative. For qualitative, there are some good ones around, but I would say that they need to be fitted to your problem. So there's stuff from Focus Vision, there's stuff from Ethos, but there are a lot of ones that I haven't used as well. Get them to take you through that process. For surveys, it changes so quickly because they're in an arms race with the operators. They will have something that works really well, and then a few months later it works less well, and then a few months later it works great. So get them to show you that project, but you're probably not going to be able to use the same app over and over again. One of the interesting options that some of the companies do, I know that Research Now do it with their app, I know that Vision Critical do it with their app, it's really what we'd call a wrapper. So you have a very, very small app that is downloaded, and it then pulls surveys which are actually internet surveys onto the system. And that is a cost-effective way of doing it. On Device are a company that have a lot of apps that will work on phones that are not smartphones, that will make them behave more like smartphones. So it's horses for courses, really.
Okay, next question. How do you incentivize people to participate in mobile surveys?
Massively variable. So if you are in Africa, you are going to pay them in airtime. Africa has the world's most developed online currency with M-Pesa. You can pay for almost anything with your mobile phone in a way that we can't even imagine in the US or the UK. If you're working with a panel company, SSI, Research Now, Lightspeed, one of these, the incentive will be done in exactly the same way as it will be done for the normal survey. If you're working with an insight community, you're probably using a prize draw. If you're doing research on behalf of the government, you're possibly not offering an incentive at all, and you're trying to make the experience as attractive as possible. So if somebody like Research Through Gaming will try to make that whole process so much fun that people are willing to take part. There are as many different versions of incentive with mobile research as with anything else. If you're trying to get people to download an app for qualitative research, you're probably going to be paying them quite a lot of dollars, $50, $100, because you're taking a lot of their time to record all of this stuff. So just as you would with a traditional qualitative diary project, you'd have to have a significant incentive. For a mobile diary project, it's going to be a significant incentive.
Okay.
As a quick aside, sorry, very quick aside here. On the Confirm It project in Africa, the incentive there for the interviewers was they got to keep the phone.
Okay. Wondering with the with mobile Does this mean most mobile surveys need to be aided questions rather than open-ended, unaided in design?
Most of them should be closed questions. And that is going to continue for a little bit longer. I think we will see a change coming in the near future with people more able to speak into their phone and with automatic text analysis. But actually most questions on PCs are closed questions as well. So yes, most will be closed. Restrict the open ends to the ones that really make a difference and are really useful.
What is the standard acceptance rate of mobile surveys?
It was about half of online surveys, and it's now about 80% as high. So if you find that 50% of the people you invite will do the survey on a PC, it's going to be about 45%. If you find that 10% of people will accept your invitation for a PC survey, it's about 8%. So it's nearly as good as inviting people to do surveys on PCs. Obviously, the best option is to give people choice.
Okay, we're going to ask one or two more questions here. Someone was asking if you could send samples of some of the mobile question surveys. Are some of those in your book? I know that someone's asking for some samples of mobile surveys.
There are some in the books, but remind me afterwards, Michelle, and I will find some links.
Okay.
Which are around.
Okay, and then how do you recommend handling grids with a list of 15 or 20 attributes, for example?
I think the starting point is to decide whether you need them, and do they need to have scales on them, or can they be selects? There is a bit of a shift in methodology in the research industry away from rating things to selecting them. So which of the following apply for each of these? How many of these phrases apply to this, rather than to what extent do these phrases apply to these? You've got to break them down into smaller sets. So let's say you feel that you can have 5 attributes on any one question, and you've got 15. Well, make that 3 questions, but use software that is capable of taking the 15, so everybody's 5 is a different random subselection, and work through that. So keep it down as much as you can. If you are going to use a scale on it, then if it's 1 to 3, you can have that scale across the page. If you're using something like 1 to 10, probably you're looking at a drop down. So you've got the brand maybe is the top of the page, you've got 5 attributes down the page, it's got a drop down. It's going to give you similar results to that grid on a PC, which tells us that the grid on the PC has actually got some challenges too. But the first thing I would do is say, do I really need to ask as many brands? Do I really need to ask as many grid questions? If I do, then I will ask it. The next step, people like John Pulliston have been doing quite a lot of research on this, is to say, okay, can I ask everybody a different 5? So rather than taking my 15 attributes and breaking them into 3, for the 3 groups of 5 for this person, I will break them into a group of 5, and every respondent will only do 5, but every respondent will do a different 5, so that I can still do my analysis afterwards.
Okay, and the last question, Ray, someone's just asking if you have data on smartphone usage by age for other countries besides the U.S. that you can distribute.
I don't, but remind me again, I'll try to pull up, because there are people around who have that sort of data. The International Telecom Communications, ITU, or something like the United Nations group, and there's a Wikipedia set which has that. I mean, the general pattern is the same the world over. It's younger and goes through to older. So there are fewer people over 60 with smartphones, and there are masses from 16 upwards, pretty much anywhere.
Okay, great.
So once you know the penetration for a country, the profile will stay similar. Generally, the gender profile stays similar, even in countries which are relatively oppressive to women. Mobile phone ownership is pretty large and pretty standard in both genders.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have to take questions from Ray today, but we want to thank you so much, Ray, for your time and presentation. It was excellent. We've got great reviews here coming in from the participants. If you have any additional questions, please send them to events@leresearch.com, and we'll get in touch with Ray and make sure that all your questions get answered. Thanks everyone for their time and their participation today. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, bye. Yeah, have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Bye.